They've picked a strategy of constant motion, constant chaos, flood the zone. They can't not keep doing that. As soon as they start to slow up, it looks like they're being less successful. The basic thing for this time is they're going to try getting away with as much as they can. And our job is to stop them.
There's this whole action that took across the whole entire nation. People now know that there is a side here to stand with.
Welcome to episode 236 of the Refuse Fascism podcast, a podcast brought to you by volunteers with Refuse Fascism. I'm Sam Goldman, one of those volunteers and host of the show. Refuse Fascism exposes and analyzes the threat we face, promotes efforts to defend people targeted by the fascists, and most essentially, challenge, mobilize, and inspire the non-fascist majority of people living in the United States to engage in determined, defiant, collective action to defeat Trump, MAGA fascism. I want to start off by thanking our patrons and sustainers who make the show possible. You can join our community today for as little as $2 a month at patreon.com/refusefascism. Thanks to those sharing the show, everyone who buys our merch to support and spread the show, see the show notes, to get your sticker packs, your beanies that are back. And we also have these beautiful enamel for the love of humanity pins that are perfect for Valentine's Day. A special thank you to those who help the algorithms that help grow our audience by rating and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts or their listening platform of choice. They boost this show so much. So after listening, please share your thoughts to help others find this resource. In today's show, we'll be sharing an interview with Daniel Hunter, author of What If Trump Wins and founder of Choose Democracy, along with two conversations I had with Kay, Kim, and Misty, activists behind No Voice Unheard, which played a vital role in mobilizing protests against Trump, and Project 2025, in which thousands participated this week. Right away, I want to share that Refuse Fascism is calling for protests this President's Day, Monday, February 17th, for people to take to the streets in their cities and towns. Here's the call for protests, which you can read in full at refusefascism.org, and it's also linked in the show notes. I am adding some developments from this past week, which I think underscore and illustrate the momentum and direction of the fascist juggernaut and the need for all of us to act together now in growing numbers. No, in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. Now is the time to stand up, resist, protest, to stop Trump's MAGA fascism. What we face is fascism, consolidating its rule in the most powerful country in the world. It echoes the Confederacy, Jim Crow, and Nazi Germany, but there is no historical precedent for fascism dominating the world with the climate at a tipping point and nuclear-armed powers at each other's throats. The Trump regime threatens the very future of humanity and life on the planet. It must be stopped. Defeating Trump and MAGA fascism will require a huge and relentless resistance, waged by millions of people standing up in the streets and throughout society to create such a profound political crisis that Trump cannot govern the country and carry out his fascist program. This will require sacrifice. It will require courage and heroism in the streets and by people in government, in hospitals, in schools, and really by all who Trump tries to order and intimidate into following his dictates. There is not a moment to lose. History has shown that fascism must be stopped before it becomes too late. If we act now, there is a future to win. The breakneck speed and cruelty of the regime's actions shock the conscience. Immigrants demonized and rounded up, including just this week sending the first 10 deportees to Gitmo. Blatant racism, like the executive order to prioritize the U.S. resettlement of white South African quote-unquote refugees. And anti-women, anti-LGBTQ plus hate spews forth. Just this week, the regime banned transgender competitors from women's sports, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children removed all reference to transgender youth who are among the most vulnerable. Civil rights and even speaking of equality are banned. Whole countries are threatened. This week, alongside war criminal and fascist Netanyahu, Trump said this.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it.
Anti-science lunatics are empowered to destroy healthcare. This week, slashing funding for approved NIH grants. NSF vetting already approved grants to nix ones that include the mention of diversity, inclusion, women, and race. Media muzzled. This week, the Federal Communications Commission opened an investigation into a Bay Area radio station, KCBS, for broadcasting ICE raids alerting the public. And I gotta give a shout out to KCBS for doing this. Theocracy and Christian supremacy being hammered into place. At the prayer breakfast this week, he announced that Paula White, his personal pastor and absolute Christian fascist, would be heading the faith office, and that he is creating a, quote, task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias, end quote, where Paula White will work alongside Attorney General Pam Bondi to assert Christian domination in the name of victimhood. Rapid climate destruction is Trump's program. This week, 168 EPA staffers were put on leave as director of the EPA, Zeldin, promises mass staff cuts, an influx of industry lobbyists, and the promotion of climate-destroying artificial intelligence as a key agency priority. Fascism changes the way the country is ruled. Fascism eliminates basic civil and democratic rights, openly oppressive and repressive. Fascism rules by decree, backed up by brute force and violent thugs. Fascism has direction and momentum. Dissent is criminalized. The truth is bludgeoned. Group after group is targeted along a trajectory that leads to horror. It is necessary, but not enough to fight each attack as it comes. We must take the offensive against the whole Trump MAGA program and direction. The Democratic Party will not stop this nightmare, even after some Democratic Party leaders correctly called Trump a fascist before the election. Now they tell you to accept his fascism in the name of quote-unquote democracy. No, there can be no reconciliation with fascism except on the terms of the fascists. This President's Day, Monday, February 17th, Refuse Fascism calls on every person and group who refuses to be complicit in a fascist America to take to the streets wherever you are. Start your own protest, no experience necessary, or join diverse protests already called. But come together, uniting all who can be united, to spread resistance throughout cities and towns, raising the slogan and declaring to the world, no, in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. Bring your signs, your heart, your courage, and righteous fury. We must act now, continuing to grow in numbers, not for ourselves, but for all of humanity. Read and spread the call to act, host a protest, donate to support these actions, visit refusefascism.org or see the link in the show notes. And I'll be hosting a Zoom to help you prepare for these actions. I'll be joined by members of the Refuse Fascism editorial board. So join us Tuesday, February 11th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, Tuesday, February 11th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You can register to join us. The link is in the show notes. We'll also be streaming it on our YouTube, our Facebook, and our Instagram. This week, the fascist assault on basic government functions continued to escalate. Approximately 60,000 civil servants have taken Trump's so-called buyout deal out of their goal of 220,000. A judge has extended the deadline for employees. Many hundreds more have been suspended across agencies. U.S. aid has been all but eliminated. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has been defunded. DOJ staff have all but taken over the Treasury and the Department of Education, with Musk's rats already at work in other departments. Even after it was halted by federal judges, many organizations and programs affected by the federal funding freeze have already had to limit services or close their doors altogether due to missing funds and/or uncertainty. Judges have also ordered DOJ employees out of the Treasury and to destroy any copies of classified information, and judges have partially blocked the efforts to shut down U.S. aid. Others have hampered some of the regime's efforts to purge the federal workforce. These legal rulings had limited effect. though it's unclear to what degree they are being enforced, and what harm already done will have lasting effects. Case in point, Customs and Border Patrol has already taken over the lease of USAID's building. This highlights that the question has never been, is it legal? Or does Trump have the legal authority to do this? It very clearly is a question of who's going to stop him. It's not DOJ employees keeping Congress out of the Department of Education. It was literally federal officers. Who do they serve? Regardless of how many times people say power of the purse, who actually controls the mechanism of fund dispersal? And if someone does that illegally, who physically stops them? If Trump shoots someone in broad daylight, who arrests him? When we say that the courts and legislature cannot be relied on, we usually mean that figuratively, but it's also true on the most basic physical level. What we need is to exert a radically different power, not one with handcuffs and SWAT gear, but the power of massive collective action, a refusal to be governed in this way, a refusal to go along with these orders, a refusal to stay home and stay quiet and let this all wash over us. Now, with that, here is my interview with Daniel Hunter. Right now, people are full of outrage and anguish, pulled by a lot of feelings of inevitability of this whole nightmare. To help ground us in the work we need to do together to defeat Trump, to defeat MAGA fascism, rapidly consolidating, but not yet consolidated, I am so glad to be speaking with Daniel Hunter. Daniel coaches and trains movements across the globe. As a founder of Choose Democracy, he's helped stop Trump's coup attempts. He has trained extensively with ethnic minorities in Burma, pastors in Sierra Leone, and independence activists in Northeast India. He has written multiple books, including What Will You Do If Trump Wins? Climate Resistance Handbook, and Building a Movement to End the New Jim Crow. Welcome, Daniel. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much. It's a terrible time to be here, but it's great to be here with you.
Likewise. I wanted to start with a piece that you wrote now a few months back. Immediately after Trump won the election in November, you published a piece that was circulated really widely on how to be prepared and grounded in the new situation. I think you had originally written it before Trump had won, and then you kind of made updates to it. And I was wondering, looking back on that now, with Trump having been in power for over 2 weeks, what are the things that stand out to you as particularly prescient? And is there anything that you would revise?
The reason I wrote the article was I had spent 8 months, almost a year, sort of dealing with the question of what would it look like if Trump returns? And we didn't know. We still don't know. There's a lot of fog of war uncertainty, but we didn't know exactly what it would look like. But I wanted us to get in better shape for it. And so one of the things I did was I asked people in other places who'd fought autocracies, what do you wish you had known? And a lot of what they talked about was psychology. It was a little bit surprising to me because tactics, strategy, what we should do, how do we work in the streets, et cetera, those were important. But a lot of what they talked about was you've got to be able to withstand the body blows. Autocracy is a system that gets created in large part because of driving fear and because people get driven into both being fearful, then they also get in such reactionary mode that it becomes overwhelmed, it becomes impossible to see your own power. The authoritarian continues to fulfill the role. The Wizard of Oz effect gets kicked into gear, and suddenly they are omnipresent and everything. Maybe backed by heavy military, maybe not, other things. But they talk a lot about the psychology. So that's where I started, which I surprised myself when I wrote the article initially. I thought I would get into strategy and tactics mostly, and realized the first place to really start was just our own selves and really creating some inner protection to the gaslighting that we're going to experience and the uncertainty factor. I find myself on a daily basis whipped around in terms of my own analysis, in terms of my own, where am I? What am I doing? Is it good enough? This reality that we're all facing at this exact moment, which is no activity that any one of us do will be enough. Anything that I suggest of what we should do, someone will listen and say, that's not all you should do, and that's not the only thing, and that's not good enough. And they're right. And that's a hard truth for activists like myself to swallow, but actually very important that we acknowledge no one of us will do enough, all of it. And so that means we can't burn out. We've got to pace ourselves. We've got to find our own footing. We've got to be in good relationship with each other and in a sense of community. So those first two that I kind of talk about really are about trusting our own selves and then finding the people that you want to move with who you also trust. And I think those remain really prescient grounding points. The other pieces are important: activism in the streets, people building alternative institutions, all that. But that piece has felt really useful to me as reminders for how we move through the times.
Have you seen examples of that being successfully embraced in more of a mass way yet? Or do you think that people are still living in that, do I believe what's happening in front of me, or like that denial stage? Widely speaking, not the quote unquote left or whatever, but like broadly speaking, how do you think people are doing it? The way that I would see it is like confronting reality. Or do you see the denial still holding?
I think the denial is still hanging on. I think there's a good amount out there. And one aspect of it, I'm reminded of colleagues in Zimbabwe who every couple of years, Mugabe, who's just a brutal dictator at that point, Mugabe would offer elections. And friends of mine would say, well, we think maybe we've got a shot this time. The opposition party is, and maybe they'll, and da-da-da-da. And so maybe they'll get a good shot at it. And then he would steal elections again. And after a while of this, I kept asking him, why would you keep creating faith that maybe it'll be different this time? And fear is a real creator of people wanting a way out of it. Pain is not something people enjoy, and so they create a story that maybe this time, ... The Charlie Brown effect of having the football pulled from you over and over again is a real thing. And I think that's one reason why rooting one's own trust within yourself, your community, the folks that you can roll with, is a good place to start, rather than investment in, say, an outside force or a Democratic Party or someone else who may play a role, but is unlikely to be a savior hero. That's not what's going to happen here. There will not be a singular savior or hero. We'll create conditions, and the conditions are us, are the collective body. So you asked, like, do I see examples of it? I think, yes, people are in despair and in frustration and sort of making meaning of it. And I think people are doing work on grief. I think that the grief, emotionally speaking, I'm not speaking tactfully, but emotionally speaking, grief is an access point when people are sad and can accept that. That's part of the acceptance of reality, which is, for me, for example, I cry almost every morning over the news. And that assists me to be more grounded in, okay, those things happened. I've lost a ton of ground politically. Friends of mine who are losing jobs or having their passports denied or whatever things are happening now, I'm with them, joining with them and experiencing that with them. And if I'm not doing my emotional work of grief, then it might not help me accept what's going on and get a good grip on it, the extent of it, the speed of it, the severity of it. Again, it's funny to me because I'm almost speaking as a therapist here, or like a psychological analysis, which is a little bit of a surprise to me to be here. The folks who worked on autocracies in other places kept telling me that's huge. The folks in Turkey kept saying it's the psychological constant. And so if you are in a reactionary mode, which many of us are, if you're in a reactionary mode, that will not be sustainable. And so they would tell me stories of after the Gezi protests, they would be in the streets over and over and over and over again, attempting to kind of replicate this reactionary moment. And it created so much exhaustion that they weren't able to keep it up. That, I think, is an important piece for us to respond to and acknowledge that, of course, we're in a reactionary moment. And of course, it makes sense to get in the gears of the system as quickly as possible. And it is important that we find our footing emotionally so that we can sustain this, because most likely this will be quite a long journey.
And what we're being called to do, and I think is very underestimated. The weight, the pull is real and heavy. And that's not to say that you as an individual, you have to do all of this alone, but to not admit the scale and scope of what's needed, I think is detrimental. And I think having that correct footing helps you do that and helps you not become paralyzed. The grief that propels you to understand and act, and that the grief that then becomes a cocoon around which you wrap yourself and can't move. I think that the more people understand their agency as part of it is part of how you break out of that cocoon. That's just how I see it. We need to create a situation, in my opinion, that they cannot go forth in governing. Their program can't advance any further. That doesn't mean necessarily that they're removed from power, but it does mean that what they want to bring about doesn't come into being. It was really important, for instance, that in India, some of his really, really atrocious anti-Muslim citizenship policies took so long to go through. I think, unfortunately, most of it has now, but it met tremendous opposition in such a way that it didn't just come to be. That was because of the actions of people. And I think that that's like a recent example that I like to remember in terms of what that could be. Now, did that stop his whole program? No, but it did matter that he wasn't able to advance. And I think that that interplay between like those who are defending people that are under attack and those that are going out and saying, we're not going to let you attack those people. We're going to be the wrench that stops you from continuing that program. There's dynamism there.
No, I think you've laid it out, which is the basic thing for this time is they're going to try getting away with as much as they can. And our job is to stop them. That's the task for the moment. And I think there's some interesting things already to track and learn. So they've picked a strategy of constant motion, constant chaos, flood the zone. So that's the strategy that they've picked. It's a kind of strategy, once you pick it, it actually is really tricky because they can't not keep doing that. As soon as they start to slow up, it looks like they're being less successful. So strategically, that means their goal, just flood the zone. Steve Bannon described this. He said, we're going to do 4 ridiculous things every day. He didn't call it ridiculous, whatever, but the media can only track one of these things, and so we'll be able to move a bunch through. That means constant speed, but they're messy. I think that's a thing that we're seeing. And so there's real opportunities for pushback. And we already saw one, which is I think we should really mark as a major defeat for Trump, which was the introduction of this OMB memo to do what's been classically called the federal funding freeze. And that was a freeze that they announced at 6:00 last week on Monday evening. And the game plan was within 24 hours, we'd freeze what turned out to be $3 trillion of funding that goes to states for Medicaid, for Meals on Wheels, for mine inspectors, for 12,600 some odd different programs across the country. Poorly planned, poorly thought through, didn't even track their own internal process. Chaos. And I mean, Choose Democracy, my organization, we were one of the first to mark this and publicly call this as our, we're now in fully coup land where we're grabbing purse strings and so forth. And within hours, people were mobilized on it. It began to get a lot of attention, mostly not from mainstream media. It mostly emerged out of grassroots groups and other folks who are impacted, identifying this scary thing, pushing back. And so there's organic pushback from many different sectors within I don't remember how long it took, but within a short period of time, 24 hours or so, they were forced to rescind that memo. There's still fuzziness because they can't acknowledge defeat. So therefore they have to say, well, we are still winning. And that's important. That's part of their stratagem, which is they have to keep saying we're winning. So they can't accept defeat. They can't acknowledge that they made a mistake. They can't acknowledge that people beat them back. But it's important that we mark that because we have to puncture the story. This is the Wizard of Oz effect. We have to puncture the story that they are all powerful. If we believe in people power, people get to decide. And not just in a democratic way, he's our president, whatever, but the people get to decide how this country operates. And he's outside of those norms so sufficiently that mainstream institutions are willing to say it. And we get to be that voice that echoes that. A big piece of their strategy right now is make us so overwhelmed that we can't track, make us feel that we're being defeated, and make us into a position where we're agreeing with his story that he's all powerful. And so that's one of the easiest ways for us to not comply in this time, which is he's not. Just because he says things doesn't mean anything's going to happen. He can talk all he wants. And that's going to be an important aspect for us to maintain in the times ahead.
Thank you for that. I wanted to go back to what we were talking about in terms of fear for a moment, because I've been thinking more about it. And I really do think that if we can make an advance in this, we'll be better in the long run if we can support people with this. And there is a lot of feeling of powerlessness, helplessness, inevitability. They're all powerful. We have no power. All of that, some of which you've spoken to. We started the conversation with handling fear and making violence rebound. And you have the point in there that I remember at the time, like writing down, was handling fear isn't about suppressing it, but it is about constantly redirecting. I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about how you see the ways that we can handle fear and make the violence rebound.
Well, I think in some ways the story I just told would be one example, which is we're in a moment in which it appears relentless. So we can grow the fear of the relentlessness and the awful things that are happening. And another option is we also say, look at us. We're able to stop some things. Us just buoying each other up a little bit. I did joke earlier about the left occasionally being judgmental on each other. And one aspect of that is we can be very aware of what's imperfect. I think we're searching and seeking for that which is perfect. I think it's beautiful. It's not a perfect win that we froze a huge thing from $3 trillion, but it's very important that we tell that story. So one aspect of it is redirecting where our energy goes. Fear is an energy direction. Fear is the direction of shrinking in the face of something. And so when we're scared of something, we hold tight, we're frozen into something. That's the physiological response to fear inside of our body. We're trained as prey who, when a rabbit hears something rustling in the woods, it freezes what's happening. The opposite of that is motion, not just doing anything, but motion that's about us being connected to other people. I mean, I think that's that feminist thinking for quite a while has said there's not just a fight, flight reaction, but also a reaction to turn to connect to other people. So that's a piece of how we handle fear, which is connecting to other human beings.
One observation of today's protest that some people, not you, and hopefully not our listeners, but I've seen too much of, and people have to kind of break from it. But I was saddened by the knee-jerk reaction from many people of don't protest, don't resist, and the immediate sus vibe that people gave. And I think that part of it is that the guy from the Bulwark, I don't remember his name, but basically being like, this is what they want. They want you to protest as a way to be like, okay, so we should just go along and appease them because that's working so well.
Yeah, no, I want to jump right in on this because I think it's important and I want to frame it this way. So one of my friends came over and she admitted to me something that felt very honest, which is she said, in this moment in the state I'm in, anybody who has any idea to do anything that isn't the thing that I think we should do right now, I think is wrong. And she's like, I'm just being a hater about every idea that isn't the one thing I think should happen right now. And I see a lot of that. I see it in me and I see it in others right now. And there is layers of suspicion or fear, historical contradictions of challenges of ways that people have done these things badly or poorly. There's reality. I'm not denying that there may be some good arguments about it, but this is not a great time. There's enough uncertainty that I'm pretty suspect of folks who feel really clear they can just shut down someone else's idea as completely useless. Especially in a time in which we're gearing up to do action. We were in a lot of shock in that first week, and second week continued to be a lot more shock. And this third week now is now the week in which people are now getting things. I spent a day where people pretty much just called me and said, we should do this thing. No, we should do this other thing. We should do this other thing. And I love that people have things they want to do. I want people to use their brains, use their intelligence, and make the best calls that they can figure out. Will they all be brilliant? No, they will not all be brilliant, but they will all happen if we support each other to try out and follow through things. And again, there are tactical things that will just not be good for us. I think there are areas of which us being, I don't even want to say them at this moment, as much as I want to just focus on, I think it's important for us to stay in some amount of motion. And so that process of gearing up motion, great. To the bulwarks or to anybody who has a kind of concern about one particular tactic or another, cool, it's not for you. But that doesn't mean that it might not be for others, especially because it may be the way they get in motion again. So we did one action, actually, Choose Democracy. We've been working with people who've been in the streets and supporting and so forth. But I notice a good sizable percent of the population is still very frozen. So I feel action around my activist crew. But when I dropped off my kid at school, people were still, hi, how's it going? It's a great day. Oh, you had a nice good weekend? Great. Oh, lovely. There's still a lot of freeze happening in society. And so we were trying to think, what's a way to help people unfreeze? And one way we thought was, what's a really low bar action that people could do to just get in something? But we've been encouraging people at 12:53 on Wednesdays to have a moment of silence, to honor the people who are being hurt, to take a pause, to reflect, to just ground yourself. I found it valuable as someone who's in a lot of motion to just take that moment. And I'm also aware of people who hadn't yet taken any motion getting together with their churches or friendship groups to have a moment of silence. And then the next sentence after the moment of silence was, wow, what should we do next? Next week, let's like get into motion, do some things. We need different tactics. For some people, they might hear that and be a moment of silence. Nah, we got to be loud. Cool. Not for you. That's fine. There's going to be a lot of different tactics to attempt to move people. One of the key things, though, is we do have to do activity that moves a wider number of people. There's a set of people who are currently attracted to some behaviors, like actions in the streets, like a march in the street. And there's other folks who may be attracted to other ways of doing things. And so we're going to need some experimentation in this phase. We're going to be in some tactical experimentation. I would love if we were, but I don't think we're in the mass non-cooperation phase. We're in the phase in which there's going to be lots of different things attempted. What I mean is we're not in the phase in which we're all in one big protest movement down DC arresting Musk. We're not there at the moment, unfortunately. I'm delighted some people are in DC doing their actions. Great. But we're not there for one unified thing. This is a moment where there's going to be some tactical innovation, people trying some things out. Moment of silence. Can we get some new folks in motion? People trying this and that and the other thing. And that's going to be important as well.
The other thing that I think is important to keep in mind is that there has been coordinated efforts in the past to get people to not do certain things. I'm not talking about individuals, I'm talking about the Democratic Party here, including a flank of NGOs and quasi-activist organizations who made decisions to keep people off the streets the last time. It was a coordinated effort. We, not you. When I'm saying we, I mean collectively. The collective we did seed the public square. The collective we did seed the discourse. Too many pulled their blinds down and stayed safe inside. We actually can't afford to do that this time. The stakes are just much higher. I was talking to two women. They have no activist experience, nothing like that. They just were like, we got to do something. The cute winter boots thing spoke to them and they started doing things around it. And they were one of the few that like took it actually in real life into their streets. They're not in big cities. That brought them a lot of heart and hope. And then they helped other people organize actions. And then it started to grow a little bit. And they were like, okay, well, we're going to help make this 50-51 thing. And the drive for them was they looked and they saw no one else was calling. They were waiting for somebody and they were like, oh, I guess we'll just do it. Seeing a need and trying your best with what you have to go and meet it, I just think is so much more of this moment than the knee jerk, you don't have the right credentials to act.
Let me frame it in yet another way. What a gift. I happen to be very pro-democracy, not the paper-thin version that we have, but pro-democracy. I believe in people and their ability to make wise decisions when they're asked. What I think is happening in these times is each one of us has a question in front of us. What are your lines? What do you believe in? What do you want to happen? How do you want to participate in making that happen? These are good questions to have a vibrant democracy, a vibrant civil square, a vibrant group of people to be involved in. And one aspect of the so-called democracy that the US has had is it's restricted all participation in democracy to voting. And that's pretty much the entire thing. That's the whole enchilada. Unless you're a billionaire, then you have a lot more. This is a good thing for people to look around. I'm not saying it's a gift in the sense that it's great for the movement, et cetera, but it's a gift for us to each look inside, ask ourselves, what do we want to do? And if it's handed to us, then we think one way. And if we say, no one else is doing it, great, I'm going to do it. I love that. I just love it. And I think it's moving and beautiful. And I love the story you told. And I think that practice is good for all of us to participate in. I think, even though I'm with you on the critique, I think is well earned and appropriate. And I'm more interested in this moment on just affirming the beauty, because it really is a beautiful thing.
I think that you and I are on the same page, and that like what we need is a situation where there is that mass non-cooperation, where there is that mass defiance. And no, we're not there yet. I think that kind of action that could prevent Trump from carrying out his program, the kind of action that we're hoping to inspire, challenge, support, this doesn't really have real precedent in modern American history. And I was wondering, like, how do we work to open people's minds to something that they've never experienced before?
I'm so glad you asked. I wrote a book. No, I mean, the reason I wrote this book, What If Trump Wins, which it's written as a choose your own adventure. And the reason I wrote it that way is it's an uncertain future. It's similar to that world of dystopian futures or Afrofuturistic novels that are exploring what if and giving us some guide points for how things could unfold. And it's not me attempting to look in a crystal ball, but just the reason I wrote that book, and it's available free online, we've just made it where people can follow different pathways of what this escalation could look like. I think that's one way, is we talk it through, we give people some visions. I think a second thing that we do have to do, and a caution here is, I agree with you that there are not recent parallels that are kind of mimicking exactly where we may end up, but there are things for us to draw on. I want us as much as possible along the way to catch the seeds that are going to flower in the future. So the fact that the federal funding freeze was pushed back, that's a win. The fact that I think tomorrow, which is the last date for how many folks have resigned out of the federal workforce, Trump's goal was 220,000 people. We'll know what the strength of non-cooperation is at that level, which is a different version of non-cooperation you and I think were using earlier, but it's very much an example, which is we're not going along with. That might be the greatest act of mass non-cooperation that we've seen in the US in quite some while, where at this stage, they're less than 20,000 people, is my understanding. And again, their goal was over 220,000. So they have 200,000 people to go. And I don't think they'll do it by tomorrow. That'll be another seed. I think another thing that we can do along the way, we can really do us a disservice if we tell a story that feels so out of our experience that it's abstracted, or it feels like, are we going to be like France and we'll have tractors in the streets regularly? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe we'll have our own way of doing it. But we're going to find out in many ways by watching the seeds that are already being planted and continue to grow those. So along the way, because I don't know what it looks like either. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know either. We don't know what our version will look like. But we'll get indications along the way if we track the seeds and then water them. The attentive, careful, spending time and energy uplifting the stories of what other people are doing that has some legwork that, again, they might not fit with all of our strategies. They might not fit with everything, but those are really important to grow. One of the behaviors that I hope we can also model for ourselves is, as much as possible, declaring victory when we see people power gaining some steam and holding on to that, even in the face of an overwhelming experience of defeat or failure. If we can't do that, there's no one else who's going to do that for us. Mainstream media has no interest in that story. There's no way that the Democratic Party is going to articulate that story for us. There's not an echo chamber within social media that's strong enough for us to echo that story out, particularly in our critical environment. So it's very important that we do spend energy identifying seeds, even if we don't love every aspect of that seed, but identifying it so that we can water it, because that's going to be another piece of how we get to that spot that you're talking about. And then I should just also add, I give propped out to many of the different pathways, but the vision people, the people who do slow work of cultural work, we're going to really need and lean in on those of you who do that kind of work. I was on a call with a bunch of activists in rapid motion, and one person who was on the call is an elder who's working on slower, how do we build long-term vision work? And we were all in rapid motion, and they said, just a thing to remember as we do these actions is really anchor on the various values, and they began articulating those values. And it slowed us up, and it changed the atmosphere, and it grounded us. That role we'll also very much need in those times, and they'll play a really critical role to help us for what's going to be a long journey.
Thanks, Daniel, for chatting with me, for sharing your expertise, your insights, your perspective, and thanks for the work that you're doing in these times to water those seeds.
Thanks for your work as a journalist telling stories. I mean, that's the role that you're playing in this moment of being that. I'm just really appreciative for and really grateful for, because we're going to need as much wisdom as we can get. None of us have it. We're all got some pieces to work with, and we just need to figure out how to share these pieces as best we can.
Absolutely. For those that want to connect more with you and your work, where do you want to direct people?
We've got a mailing list at choosedemocracy.us, where we've just been sending memos, largely encouragement. Keep on, keep it on, folks. And if you're interested in the Minute of Silence on Wednesdays at 12:53, which is the moment when the insurrectionists broke through the police barricades, also the moment in which those oligarchs were seated in the inauguration. So we're honoring that moment and taking it back. So that's just at minuteof.us.
Thanks so much. We'll put those in the show notes.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad to share that there were important acts of protest and resistance this week, even though they are not yet at the commensurate level, at the stage of mass defiance and non-cooperation. Very importantly, there have been significant student daily walkouts in LA this week and student walkouts nationwide, particularly in California, standing against the regime's attacks on immigrants. In New York City, thousands came out on Saturday to support trans youth from the cruel attacks from the Trump regime and to challenge the hospitals that are complying with such cruel directives. The legal fight in the courts, including everyone from unions to educators to FBI agents challenging aspects of Trump's plans. We want to highlight in particular the 50-51 protests that took place this past Wednesday across the country, bringing thousands in the streets to protest Trump and Project 2025. They highlight that there are decent people in this country who refuse to go along with this nightmare and the potential for the type of mass refusal we need to defeat Trump and MAGA fascism. It is in that spirit that I am delighted to share my conversations with Kay, Kim, and Misty, 3 women who met online and came together to form No Voice Unheard, who helped coordinate this outpouring this past Wednesday. I spoke with them before and after their action, and I'm so glad to share some highlights of those conversations with you. Have a listen.
505.1 really started off like super, super quiet. It was a grassroots thing. It's really just back on Reddit, back around January 29th when everyone else was bringing up all these other protests in the start. I saw something about it. I went and looked into it a little bit. I saw the mission they were trying to put forward, go out and make a statement at every single capital in every state just to essentially denounce Trump's agenda, to go against Project 2025, stripping away everybody's rights. Everything that's happened since then and everything that's going to continue to happen, honestly. I really felt like it was something that we wanted to put out and say, hey, this is happening. And maybe we're not super sure on the details right now. This is a super, super grassroots movement. There's no leader. It was a decentralized organization at first, and it still is right now. But it was something that, we felt really had a lot of potential to it, to show up and say, hey, we're not going to be quiet and we're going to do it right when you're working. We're going to be right in front of your face and you can't turn away from us. You're going to know that we have a voice and we're going to go out of our way for you to hear it. So
thanks so much for that. One of the things that has been so inspiring is how quickly people have made it their own, have looked at the situation and have said, this is intolerable. I'm going to join this. I've never protested before. I've never done something before. I've never organized before, but I hate seeing these raids happening. I hate seeing the lives of the trans community under attack. I hate seeing the cruelty and brutality that this regime is raining down. I hate the fact that we are seeing right before our eyes this whole nightmare unfolding, and I'm going to do something. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to organize. And I think that it's just incredibly refreshing. And when I first came across these protests, I didn't know exactly where they were going to go, whether they were going to take off or not. There are sometimes things that live online and people want things to happen, but they aren't really going. There's no real momentum behind them. And I think that it is so refreshing to see people taking this up, and that tomorrow it seems to be, I think, more than 50 protests happening. If there's things that as women who've been following it, but also not just following it, but promoting it and working to make it as powerful as it can be, kind of what have you guys been experiencing as being in the hub of this in terms of where you think we're going to see protests tomorrow and what they might look like?
We've always been someone that's here just to kind of promote and share the word, because it's so censored everywhere you go now. You're just waiting for something to come across your feed at the right time to see it possibly. But people had a real chance to take a look and say, hey, this is something that I can think about a little bit. I can start working towards. I can tell my friends about. And I think that was a big piece of it, is sharing our document with people, just to share all that data and say, hey, you're not alone. There's not just some random things floating around out here. There's this real thing that could happen. And it started off at each state, each capital. And very quickly, as we grew, as our group, 5051 came up along with it as well. I think it went from like 10,000 to 50,000 followers just on Reddit in the matter few days, which was insane. People started talking. They were out in their community, kind of searching like, oh, who else is in New York right now? I can't make it to the Capitol. How can I still protest? How can I still be a part of this? It's 9 hours away from me. So a lot of people, they started banding together and saying, well, we have a large group here, then we want to protest the same thing. Like, let's go to our city hall. Let's make the same statement. Even though we can't show up there, others might be able to. In fact, others are still showing up and doing that. We're going to spread this message even farther. I love that. And seeing people step up to take the role and to come on and say, hey, yeah, I'm going to go and be here. I'm going to make sure that if we need a permit, I'll get that. If we need to talk to the police and warn them about it, I'll go ahead and take that initiative on. And that's the biggest thing that's happened. It's just seeing these people be so motivated in the fact of their community wanting to rise up and wanting to take that action and actually making it happen.
Yeah. On TikTok, I mean, that's how it kind of started for me. And the post that I posted, it has almost 9,000 comments, but almost every single one is people saying, oh, is something happening in my state? But then under that is a whole thread of people connecting within that state. So that's where we came together and we're kind of like, we are going to connect people so that we can put this all together. And in the Reddit sub, there wasn't really anyone taking all the information and putting it together for somebody to go and look at. And we went ahead and did that.
I mean, initially it started with us just having a little notepad and put our comments saying like, I'm in Michigan. I'm in Michigan too. I'm in Michigan too. I'm in Michigan too. But no one had any answers.
Exactly.
We go around and we were searching and we were looking at the posts that didn't have much to them. And we were saying, hey, like someone's in your area. They're trying to do this. Go find them here. Go connect with them. Go do what you can. Quickly, that turned into me wanting to be a little more organized for us and be like, hey, here's our Excel sheet. This will make it easier for us to like actually tell people and just copy paste it out. And very quickly, I came into the realization that, hey, we can just share this sheet too. People can have access to all of this. And even more so, you can see that there's stuff going on. Even if it's not in your area right now, people are rising up. Even if your state, someone's a few hours away and they're doing a protest and people underneath that are going, well, what about in West Palm Beach? You know, I can't make it all the way up to the north side of Florida. Where is everyone else at? And then like Kim's saying, people are uniting under that. And furthermore, just keeping up and some of them taking on initiative to make their own little protests. I think that's really been a huge, huge factor of people looking at these 51 protests and saying, maybe this isn't something that's been officially backed by some big organization. We've already gone and taken the steps to raise our voice on our own. Why don't we continue to do that? Why don't we take this on? Why don't we take the community that we've made here now and why don't we do something even bigger with it? Why don't we spread the word even more and take it to a larger place? I think that's just been so beautiful to see.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kate. Kim, you wanted to share something?
I mean, we saw a void that needed to be filled. And I think that seeing everyone connect it made me want to do this so much more. Honestly, it makes me so emotional to go through and read the comments, even now on the new videos and on the Reddit. I mean, people are so motivated to go and do something about this. And I've never felt so much more momentum. I just feel it building up in a positive way, and I'm just excited.
Part of what stood out to me about these calls for protest is that people have been putting the word fascism on their posters, on their sign, on their digital flyers and stuff like that. I think that it's really important, not just because we're the Refuse Fascism podcast and we say the word fascism to correctly describe this regime, but because it's what we face. We do need to defend immigrant lives, and we do need to defend the trans community, and we do need to defend women's right to abortion and basic humanity, and we do need to do all of those things. We do need to defend the environment against further destruction from this regime. All of those are needed, but what undergirds that whole attack is fascism. Exactly. And so I really appreciated that so many people were taking that up and taking that on and doing that from their own understanding. And I think that a lot of people, and you probably sense this too, is people use the fascism word to describe all the shit that they hate. Every bad Republican policy is just, well, then that's fascism. It's actually something particular, that it's a qualitative change in the form of rule in this country. It is obliterating the norms. It's eviscerating the basic rights of people, including and especially the rights of people to oppose it, to resist, to stop it. So that means seeking to eviscerate people's right to protest in the streets, but also working to eviscerate the ability for people within the halls of power to resist. And that's what we see with these mass purges. This is what we see with people being basically forced into resignation and suspended. All of that is part of the same thing, that it relies on open terror and violence. And if people do not think that they are seeing that now, they need to wake themselves up. I just think that that violence is both from the state. It's the violence that we see when people are being ripped out of hospitals and ripped out of schools and ripped out of churches by ICE, but it's also the mass terror that we see, that threat of violence, not just from the state, but from their shock troops, their fascist thugs, the Enrique Tarrios and Rhodes, all the 1,500 that got pardoned. That is part and parcel of this fascism. And then I just wanted to say one last thing about it that relates to your protest is that if we're able to understand it as fascism, we understand that part of what they're doing is ripping up norms that do exist, like trying to change the Constitution to do away with birthright citizenship or do away with due process for immigrants, just shredding that. And then a part of it comes from the institutions as they exist, the norms that exist, like the fact that ICE does exist, or the fact that police terror has been police terror since the conception of the police. So some of those things are built into the institutions and built into the norms. And so if all we do is try to cling to the institutions and cling to the norms, we can't actually confront the fascism. And what you both have been such big players in is helping people break away from that and see their agency and see that, look, no one is coming. There is no cavalry that's coming that isn't us. We are the only force that can do this. Not just the three of us, right? But the millions and millions that hate Trump and everything he stands for. And it's by us putting our bodies in the streets and saying, no, we're not going to tolerate. We're not going to tolerate any of this, and refusing fascism and putting forth that positive morality, that positive vision within that, and that's why I really appreciate the slogan that we use, which is in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. We're doing this with the care of people all around the globe, with the aspirations of all of humanity. And we're carrying that with us into the streets tomorrow, but not stopping there. And so I just wanted to bring that into the conversation. I don't know if you have any thoughts that you wanted to share off of that.
I just wanted to say, it truly is we the people, and that's what we're going to prove. Yeah, let's go.
I think also the fact that they're here trying to demonize and separate certain people here, and they're sitting up on the top. They're fine. They're getting their own control. They're living their life. It's all good. But we, the people down below, we're the ones that are being divided. We're being instilled with fear, not just with people around us, but in the fear of doing anything too. We're being separated left and right, and you can clearly see it. I think it's just, it's something you have to fight against. And that's a big thing about this protest too, is getting out there and letting people see you, being known, being heard, being at every capital.
Loud.
Everyone is going to hear about you. Everyone's going to hear about what you're doing. And even if they weren't even knowledgeable, because we have people come back and be like, I didn't even know this is a thing. I'm appalled. Like, how does this not happen? They could be sitting at home and then all of a sudden they turn on the news and they hear about this big storm front taking the nation. They're going to realize there's power. There is a choice. There is a time that we can stand together as people.
I say this all the time, but I really believe it, is people stand up when they see others standing up. We may not want to be, but we need to be the first ones. We need to go out there and we need to break it so that people can see themselves in this. Protest, yes, is about, we need to make things ungovernable for the Trump regime. We have to make it so that they can't get any more of their horrendous program through. That has to be our mission. But in doing that, when we're in the streets, we're not just speaking to the regime. We're speaking to the people who aren't acting.
Exactly.
And we're calling them forward. And we're saying, there's a place for you. You're welcome. And we're also saying that silence is complicity at this point. And you don't need to be silent. You can be with us. And we can do tremendous things, but we can only do that together. Things are still unwritten, but we have to get together really quick to start writing a different future.
For example, those flyers, I worked with someone random in the Reddit sub who was just so dedicated, clearly a graphic designer from somewhere. And just created the most incredible posters and did all 50 states. We went through, we did all of the edits. There are so many people willing to just do anything we need, and it's incredible.
People want to help, and it's so clear, and they just need direction. And we're hoping to help give some of that. This isn't the end. This is the start.
I just want to underscore again, like, you are looking at an emergency situation, acting on emergency footing. And the fact that it isn't all perfect right away, the fact that you are acting at all and not just like, oh, I'm going to do this, but creating a vehicle for thousands and thousands of people to act. I just hope you know how precious that is. Unfortunately, it's too rare. I'm just full of gratitude that I've been connected with you and the work that you're doing. It really, really matters. Yesterday, something began to change. The private hatred of everything that Trump stands for, that MAGA stands for, became public in a mass outpouring across the country. Thousands in small towns and big cities, from high school students to seniors, thousands pouring into the streets, rejecting fascism, many compelled by a hatred of particular aspects of the Trump program, whether it be attacks on immigrants or the attacks on trans rights or the forcible transfer of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip, withstood very cold temperatures in some places, going into the streets against snow, really cold, rain in some places. People drove hours in some places to get to these protests. It was really a noted change. And I am really, really honored to talk to some of the women who were part of kicking this grassroots effort up and off on the national stage. Organizers who wanted to see people have their voices heard and their resistance seen. It is a pleasure to speak with Kim, Kay, and Misty, and they've been working on social media basically around the clock to bring people into the streets in these 50-51 protests and in other actions before then. So welcome, Kay, welcome, Kim, welcome, Misty. Thanks for being with me.
Thank you.
I just want to say we met through social media. Kay and I, we posted, and we had 2 posts that went viral. I had almost 2 million views and she had almost the same. And then we had 250,000 likes. But the biggest part of it was all the comments. We got thousands and thousands of comments of people being like, hey, I'm in Florida. Is there anything going on? And then underneath those, you see hundreds of people being like, hey, I'm in this part of Florida. Let's do something here. And that was for January 29th. And that's how we kind of saw that there was such a void for this. And people really just wanted to connect. And
I would say we realized how much it was needed for people to get out there and go, because a lot of people were messaging or commenting on the videos like, hey, thank you so much. It's usually way too late before I find any of the protests that I want to go to.
Yeah, you provided that organization, that vehicle to fill this vacuum where people have a means to not just express themselves, but to find each other and to build that community that we need to further build more, larger, more impactful, relentless action. So I think that that's really, really vital. And I wanted to just ask, what stands out to you from yesterday? Like, what are the highlights in terms of either powerful moments or just general thoughts on yesterday's protests?
You know, I feel like for the nationwide aspect of it, it was so moving to see some of these smaller capitals and states that live in a real red zone really come out and show up still. You know, I'm out in the South still, and we had such a huge turnout. I know I showed it to one on January 29th, and I was standing there alone with a sign. So I was like, I'm hoping this isn't the same thing. And I knew it wouldn't be after all the work we'd put in, but it was just so great to see all those smaller red states kind of come out and still show we're here. We're going to be loud. We're not going to be unseen. And then just on the smaller scale, like here in mine, someone had fallen down because they had a diabetic shock go through, and instantly we all stopped. People went over to help them. We gathered for a while in between marching from the Capitol and then back to it. We stopped. People were handing out waters, snacks, make sure everyone was taken care of. Everyone was peaceful. Everyone was just there to show what a community really should be like and what we should be aiming for in our country.
Thanks for that. Misty, do you want to share your thoughts on powerful moments. What's standing out to you from this nationwide action?
So I went to my capital, Olympia, in Washington, and it was truly amazing to see the community just come together. And I had so much. So I had my Bi flag and my Mexico flag. And it was just truly to see all of the support for everyone and that we're all there coming together to fight back. And the chant that really got to me was immigrants are welcome here, because it's true. And no one is illegal on stolen land.
Thanks, Misty. Kim?
I think the most powerful and moving part for me was afterwards and going through everyone's lives, collecting all the photos, just making content out of it, seeing all of the incredible photos taken from everyone across the nation. Like, it made me cry. It's just cool to see everyone connect. And it's funny because when we were promoting it, we were getting a lot of pushback from number 47 supporters. And I think after they saw that everyone actually got together, we didn't hear as much. It is what it is. We're going to get pushback. We're going to get those comments and all of that, but we're just going to fight through it.
People now know that there is a side here to stand with if they want to come and they want to stand up and fight. I think that's, the wide scale implications of this year and moving forward especially. But just as of today even, we have had so many more people reach out to us via our site and say, hey, I want to organize this, or I'm trying to organize this in this day. Can you help me out with some of the logistics? Like, what do I need to do here? Or people that have already figured that out and they're just like, hey, can you list this? Can you help me promote it? Like, I want to get people out here protesting with me. And it's just dramatically increased over the last day here. And like, we've had those before. It was always great to see them. We always love having them in here as part of why we do what we do. But it is probably tripled or quadrupled over the last day here.
I just wanted to give you an opportunity. If there's anything that we didn't talk about that you want to make sure that people know about, that you have the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, I love that you brought up that fact of like people actually saying the word rejecting fascism. There were so many signs of people saying, we're not repeating history with a swastika over it, or saying reject fascism. But there were so many people calling it out for exactly what it was. I mean, that was huge. And I know I've heard you say in one of your other podcasts here, people are afraid to say that. And for people to step over that gap and to really call it out. And I see it so much in social media now too. More and more people are saying this. They're putting it on their posters. They're putting it on their signs. They're calling it out for exactly what it is. And they're saying, we're not going to stand for it.
Yeah, you got to name it in order to stop it.
Exactly.
So on our website, we actually have a form where you can type in your information, what you're looking for from us, and we get an email and we'll reach right back out to you.
And the website again?
It's nvunheard.org. We're just finishing the process of building it. So the calendar function in particular is a little buggy at the moment, but we have a meeting with our web designer here in a little bit just to help work out some of those kinks. But you can definitely reach out to us very easily through there. We've been getting a lot of messages there lately. Don't be afraid to use it.
Well, thank you all for the work that you're doing, for your passion, for your determination, for your courage to do it. So I am so glad that we are connected, and I really look forward to whatever's next.
Yeah, so are we. Thanks for having us here again.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was nice talking to you.
Thanks for listening to Refuse Fascism. Reminder to find information on the February 17th President's Day protests, to post your own action, and to support the actions, visit refusefascism.org or see the link in the show notes. And please join us for a Zoom on Tuesday, February 11th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Only the people can defeat Trump MAGA fascism. Find out how. You don't want to miss this. See the show notes to register. You can also be tuning in via our YouTube channel or live on Facebook and Instagram. Want to support the show? Spread the imperative and support the show by getting merch like Refuse Fascism beanies, sticker packs, or for the love of humanity, pins. See the show notes to get yours. Join our Patreon community to fuel refusal of this fascist nightmare. Join for as little as $2 a month at patreon.com/refusefascism. Or for no dollars, share the show with others. Rate and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, or comment on our socials or YouTube. It makes a difference and is so appreciated. Be sure to connect with us on social media at Refuse Fascism, including on Blue Sky. Find me on TikTok at Sam Goldman RF. As always, thanks to Richie Marini, Lena Thorne, and Mark Tinkleman for helping produce this episode. Thanks to incredible volunteers, we have transcripts available for each show. So be sure to visit refusefascism.org and sign up to get them in your inbox. Until next Sunday, in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America.